Hey everybody, welcome to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I'm the former horoscope columnist for Elle magazine, and I am also an occasional tutor at the London School of Astrology. And today I'm podcasting from my car with my little baby in the backseat having a snooze, and this is like the third take of recording this, because last night I recorded a whole episode and I was really pleased. I was like, brilliant, all in the bag, and then I realised that it hadn't recorded properly. So yeah, I think my phone had gone to sleep and then it just stopped recording, so that was annoying. And I thought, well, you know what, maybe that's just the way it's meant to be. And then this morning I tried again to record it, and the cat and the baby, it was just hard because I had the baby awake and in the same room as me, and he was a bit cranky. Now I'm in the car doing this, and it is raining outside a little bit, so every now and again there's going to be a little bit of rainfall, but I can see a clear blue patch of sky, so I'm really hoping that it stays that way, and I can get something recorded for you guys. So firstly, the reason I'm in the car is because I've come to the local cooperative healthy food shop, Whole Foods, with the sole purpose of refilling my shampoo bottle. And unfortunately I left my shampoo bottle at home, so I'm really annoyed because I completely forgot to pick it up as I was leaving. So I've come all this way, well, it's not that far, but I've come on a special journey here for nothing really. I'm going to go in and have a look and see if they've got any other bits and bobs that I need at the moment, but otherwise I'm probably just going to have to go to the supermarket and get another one of these shampoos, and then just use this bottle and the other one in tandem kind of thing. So yeah, so that's annoying, isn't it? That's really annoying. Now I'm recording this as we've got lovely Mars-Venus conjunction in the sky, and there's also a Jupiter-Uranus sextile, and this sextile will continue, as will the conjunction of Mars and Venus, into the day tomorrow, or today that you're listening to this, on the release day anyway. Which, you know what, like the Jupiter-Uranus contact, when it's like a nice contact, is always a lovely little push into doing something a little bit out there, and you know, something a little bit different. And Mars and Venus coming together as well is also a really nice meeting of some very encouraging and gentle energies, which can prompt us into taking action and doing something we love. So just to let you know what I'm doing, I'm booked in tomorrow to get my hair cut and coloured, which is something I haven't done for a very long time. The last time I actually had my hair cut was about 2 years ago, before the pandemic. I mean, I have cut it since, but I cut it myself and I did a really bad job. And haven't had it coloured since 2015, I think, or 2015, maybe even 2014. Gosh, it's been a long time since I put any colour in my hair. And and I'm also upgrading all of my equipment so that I'm able to start putting my videos together a bit more and get the ball rolling as far as that's concerned. I'm also scheduling admin time, so that I can actually start getting on with my work, and my work being the astrology stuff that I do and booking people in for readings. So if you've put your name on the waiting list, I will be getting in touch. So if I'm not going to email you from the stephanie@stelliumastrology.com email address, because that email address goes into spam sometimes. So I'm going to email from a different account. So keep your eyes peeled. And if you do have stephanie@stelliumastrology.com, add me to your trusted senders, just because otherwise you might miss it. So yeah, I'm going to be getting in touch very soon with information about booking readings, and I'm going to be doing it in chunks, because everyone who's shown interest in booking a reading with me, I don't know how far ahead my diary can be booked, so I'll see what happens first. I'll see if I can do that. And yeah, the only sort of contingency is I'm going to have to take payment at the time of booking, which I'm happy to refund if you have to cancel for any reason. That's absolutely fine. It's just because it prevents people from, I used to have a lot of people booking in with me and then just not turning up, so it just prevents that from happening, because a lot of preparation goes into an astrology reading, and I can spend quite a long time looking at charts and looking at patterns and things like that, and then if they don't turn up, I've spent a lot of time for nothing, doing something that was a complete waste of my time, basically. But the good news is that PayPal have now got this new thing, basically what Klarna does, which is where you can break down the payments and pay in 3 installments for a service. So basically, and you don't get charged interest or anything like that at all. So it works out really well, because if you don't want to pay everything all in one go straight away, you can pay in installments rather than the whole chunk of money. And that way, in the smaller chunks, you can manage it around any of your bills or anything like that you might have to pay. So that's the good news. And the other good news is if you're one of my patrons, then you don't have to wait for readings. I can get you booked in sooner. So yeah, just bear that in mind if you're one of my patrons, and they are going to be getting first dibs on readings. And if you would like to queue jump, or you're interested in what's going on my Patreon page, just check it out. It's patreon.com/Stellium Astrology, and there's loads of videos on there. There's some tutorials. There's lots of stuff on there about me and just what I'm up to. Sometimes I get a bit ranty, and sometimes it's it's just nice, fun catch up kind of stuff. But it's all astrology based and my life based, and I really do enjoy it. So yeah, feel free to go check out Patreon. I've got 3 tiers. And the bottom tier is just a $1 or £1, so extremely affordable. Okay, so today I just wanted to remind you of the waiting list. I also wanted to ask you that if you're listening on Spotify, to take your phone out of your pocket and to go onto the screen where you can see my album artwork, and just press the 3 little buttons, the 3 little dots, which will prompt you to add or review the podcast. You can actually review the podcast from that point. And that would be really great, because you can't actually write a review on Spotify, you can only rate it. But that would be brilliant if you could, do that for me. And that just helps Spotify suggest the podcast to other people who might be interested in listening to an astrology-focused podcast. And yeah, I'm going to be getting on with some more content soon that's built around more of the learning aspect, I think, because there's plenty to say, but I just need to use one of my admin days to do a bit of forward planning. I've got a few more admin days coming up, which is great. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind leaving me a review and rating the podcast on there, that would also be very, very, very greatly appreciated. So on with today. Today we are talking about keeping it simple. I thought I'd break it down to 5 points of how to keep it simple while you're interpreting the natal chart, because it can be extremely easy to get carried away with, obsessing over things that aren't really necessary. So I thought just breaking it down into 5 points might actually help. So point 1, the first point, was inspired by a post shared by my friend and a guest on this podcast, Fernanda Paiva. She shared it on one of the astrology groups that I'm in, and I'll have to send it out. I'll have to put it in the post with this podcast. But basically, the first one is about not having too many additional objects in the chart calculation. It's very easy if you're using something like Solarfire or astro.com. You can add all sorts of different things to the chart calculation, like Lilith and Ceres and Pallas and Juno and loads of things. And then you've got all these different other dwarf planets, and loads and loads of things that you can add, which can really cloud the interpretation, because I think it's so much easier to look at a chart that is quite simplified, a lot less bodies to look at, and when you're putting all those extra bodies in, it can make it so crowded. It can be even hard to tell which aspect line is going where. And I've seen some people posting up a chart which has got almost every single degree populated with something, and aspect patterns everywhere. It's just like the aspect pattern forms like a massive, huge, it looks like, do you remember spirograph, when you could like stick a biro in their little circular thing and just draw like all these patterns? It kind of looks like a spirograph diagram in the middle, rather than picking up on like specific aspect patterns and stuff. And yeah, it can just really make it really difficult to identify what's going where, what's aspecting what, And you know, sometimes if you've got overcrowded houses, the houses kind of expand to accommodate, even though they finish at, you know, the same degree as they always would, to whichever house calculation you're going to use. Sometimes they just try and plonk as many bodies in as possible, and it sort of expands the house to make that possible for you to see that. So it can really distort the interpretation process, or the interpretive craft. So yeah, that's my first tip. Remove all the additional bodies. You know, when you start getting really good at just interpreting the natal chart as it is, then think about sticking more things in. And of course, if you're just doing it for yourself and you're just curious about looking at where Lilith is and what that might mean for you, or you know, studying one thing at a time or a few things at a time, that's absolutely fine if you're able and capable to do it. But if you're trying to interpret the chart and they're causing a bit more of an obstruction than they should be, really, then it's probably a good idea to remove them and to just kind of simplify the process to enable you to develop the basics, which, you know, I always say that you can't do too much of the basics. I think the basics are so key. So that's the first point. The second point I want to make actually leads on from the first point, where I was talking about house systems. Now, the house system that you choose is very personal to you. You know, it's one of those things, it's literally one of the biggest dilemmas that every student astrologer encounters very early on in their journey. It's, what house system should I be using? We're spoiled for choice. I actually did a really good, I had a great conversation with Wade Caves, who is a brilliant astrologer and a very enigmatic speaker. And he did part 2 for the patrons, where he discusses the astronomical calculation of the houses. It's not too complex. You can follow it quite easily. It's very interesting, and I learned something. You know, he's very, very good. So yeah, he taught me something about it, and he shares his personal opinion on what he thinks is better. And I have to say, I'm inclined to agree with him, actually. I do think that it's more important to go with something that's calculated in a more specific way, but only when you feel confident that you understand how that house system works. I was raised on equal house system, which equal is apparently one of the earliest calculations ever. I think they say it's one of the oldest, so, you know, kind of, if you want to be an astrology purist, then, you know, go with equal. I'm going with equal because that's what I learnt on. But I do use Placidus sometimes, and I do use Regiomontanus when I do like horary and electional, and I also do use what other one do I use? Oh gosh, brain is dead now. But I use all sorts of different house systems, basically. I don't just stick to one. Oh yes, whole signs. I use whole signs for when I'm doing horoscopes. So yeah, you know, everyone has their own preference. I would say pick whichever causes you the least stress, the least difficulty, and then you can make inquiries. It's what I did. You know, I was using equal, and what's great about equal is it gives you an added insight to what the midheaven means, because you don't just have the midheaven in the chart, you also have the 10th house cusp. So, you know, the midheaven will always fall in the equal house system at the point that it should, but the 10th house won't start from the midheaven like it would in, like the Placidus house system, for example. It will start at the 10th house division from the ascendant at that degree. So, for example, at my 17 degree Gemini ascendant, I have a 17 degree, I think it's Pisces, on the cusp of my 10th. My brain's a little bit, might be Aries actually, but either way, so it's Pisces actually. So yeah, just bear that in mind, because then it can give you an additional depth, if you want, to what the career point could mean for somebody, and that's a very easy house system to use. Because if you use something like Placidus, I'm not trying to talk you down from it, by the way, I think Placidus is really interesting. You have things like intercepted houses, or intercepted signs actually, so you have wider houses and narrower houses, and with the wider houses sometimes they will completely absorb a complete sign. So in my chart, Scorpio and Taurus are completely absorbed, and that is a whole show in itself to talk about. So I kind of always described it as landlocked, where it can't reach the cusp of a house, so that Taurus and Scorpio don't rule the cusp of any house in my chart, which is interesting for me because I have a Scorpio moon. So what does that mean? And then I have 2 houses in my chart ruled by Capricorn and Cancer. So, it gives an extra added dimension to the chart in that way. But you have to understand what that stuff means. And I think when you're a student astrologer starting out, I think it can be complicated. But like I said, it's down to personal preference. So pick the house system that you find the easiest, the house system that, causes you the least stress, because as time goes by you can explore the houses and decide what you want with a bit more knowledge under your belt. So yeah, keep it simple, and if you're interested, check out what Wade Caves had to say. The part 1 of the interview is on the podcast and also on the YouTube channel, the enhanced version, that is. And yeah, the second part is available to patrons. So, point number 3 is to try and avoid overwhelm, which you could say ties into having too many objects in the chart. But for me, reducing overwhelm is if there's an expectation to do something a certain way, really, if you decide that you want to interpret the chart differently to the big 3, I've always said, like, go in by the front door or the ascendant and then look at the sun and the moon. Now that's a great way of doing it for most people, and usually the ascendant, the sun and the moon can already build a really great picture of somebody's personality and a bit more about them. But it might be that you feel that applies too much pressure and that you don't really want to do it that way. And some people feel like as soon as they're put on the spot to do something, they can't do it. The perfect example I've got for this actually is my mum and dad came to visit me this week, and I normally play guitar and I play it in front of Ewan and I sing songs to him and that. And there's one song that I play every single time I pick up my guitar. It's a song called It Won't Be Long and I'll Be Hating You by Johnny Paycheck, which was actually a song on the Rebel radio station on Grand Theft Auto 5. And I love that song so much that I decided to cover it. And I picked up my guitar while my mum and dad were over, and Ewan started getting really excited because he saw me holding the guitar, really smiling. I started to play and I suddenly just had a complete brain fart, and I couldn't remember the chords or how to play it. And I thought, this is so weird, because normally if it's just me and the baby, I can just play it and it's fine. But for some reason, when I've got an audience, I just freeze and I can't do it. It's Saturn in my 5th house. I have a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in my 5th house, so the second I've got an audience, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Even with my mum and dad or my sister, it's just really funny. And I think that this can be the kind of that performance anxiety. You can get that with astrology when expected to go in using specific method. So what I'm saying is reduce that overwhelming feeling of performance anxiety by trusting whichever thread you want to follow, basically, into the chart. It doesn't have to be through the big 3. This leads me into kind of the 4th point, which is about encouraging your own personal style when reading. So another way to simplify things is to realise that not everybody's going to do things the same way. We all have different approaches to things. We all have different ideas about how to go about daily life. When you're using a computer, there are some people that like to use the mouse to click on things. There are some people that like to use keyboard shortcuts. I'm more of a keyboard shortcut kind of girl. But there's always an option. There's always a different way of going about it. And you'd still get the same outcome regardless of whether you've used a mouse or whether you've used a keyboard shortcut. And it's the same with using the natal chart, or interpreting the natal chart. It's always down to what comes most naturally to you. I'm going to break it down into the elements. So if you happen to be a water sign, then you're going to be much more intuitive with the chart. I think that the chart's going to speak to your intuition. You're going to be able to just follow something. If something feels like it's calling you, you can fall into that conversation with your client, your friend, your parents, or whoever, your family, whoever you're looking at their chart, and have a conversation about something that is intuitively pulling you. With the earth signs, I think they're going to be much more practical and process driven. So having instructions on how to follow the chart is possibly going to work better for the earth signs. They're going to have a better idea of how to unpick the chart based on a kind of rule book. As a Capricorn, I know that I was obsessed with like how the orbs of degrees. I'd be like, oh no, that's too wide for a conjunction. And I used to think that like even more than a couple of degrees was too wide for a conjunction. It wasn't perfect. But my moon, my Scorpio moon, is intuitive. I'll be talking to a client and I'll suddenly see an image in my head and I'll be like, I'm seeing this thing. Not everybody, sometimes it doesn't happen, but you just have to trust it. And that usually is opening up something for you there. With fire signs, they also have a type of intuition. It's kind of more of a sense for something though, like rather than having that intuitiveness, there's a sense of oh, my little man's just opened his eyes. What's the time? Okay, he has had a 35-minute nap. So yeah, having a sense for something, it's something that I noticed with my partner. There's this kind of astuteness with fire signs. It's almost like a kind of knowing. So trust that knowing that you have. And also fire signs generally tend to be quite knowledgeable. I find they're usually quite natural teachers, natural leaders. So they are fearless in their approach to the chart usually. And the air signs are a lot about interaction. So the chart can open itself up through conversation. I know my Gemini ascendant will tell you that I can talk and talk and talk and talk until I've solved a problem. Sometimes I'll be leaving one of my friends a WhatsApp message. I'll be like, oh, I need your advice. I don't know what to do. And as I'm talking, I'm like, I know what I need to do now. Because the conversation, the process of articulating the issue is part way of reaching the solution. If you're a Libra, then definitely the to and fro of conversation is going to be really useful for you, as is probably for a Gemini ascendant as well. Geminis might use their general knowledge to work around the natal chart and find a way to explore the chart through the little stories that they can tell. As I'm sure you can imagine, this is what I do on my podcast. And Aquarius is definitely in tune with that sense of, I do definitely think that astrology is a very Aquarian subject, and they seem to be quite in tune with concepts and codes a little bit. That's what my partner always says. He says he thinks I'm great with learning codes because I suppose it must be the Aquarius stellium and the Scorpio moon, and I always was very interested in code cracking when I was younger. Had a bunch of books about cracking codes, and I have always been somebody. I even cracked the code on my school, one of those push button code things to get in. I cracked that code at school, and broke us all into the science building when it was raining, because I was just, relentlessly trying to get in. I'm like, don't know what's wrong with me. I was always a bit of naughty, bit of a rebel. So anyway, yeah. So air signs are probably going to be able to unpick, decode, and explore the chart through the thought process and articulating the chart while understanding the symbolism on a more logical level, I would say. So think about what your emphasis is, or what your combination is. So it's good that I've got a bit of water, a bit of earth and a bit of air. I think it helps. If you've got a very strong emphasis of earth, for example, it might be that you really do need to sit down with the textbooks and really bury your head in them and really try and work through a logical process. Whereas, with the water signs, for example, you might think, okay, I kind of got it now. I've got a loose idea of what I need to do, and then just trust your intuition. It will guide you around the chart to the places that it needs to go. So that's the fourth point. And really the fifth point was really following on from that, I suppose, just to say, trust that whichever way the chart speaks to you, that way, that's the information you're supposed to receive, or the information you're supposed to be giving. It's kind of like your vibe attracts your tribe. So your clients that come to you, the people that come to you and ask you to look at their chart, those people are ready to hear what you have to say. I used to talk to a good friend of mine who is my very lovely Chiron astrologer, who won't come on the podcast because she's super Scorpio about it. She doesn't want to know anybody and doesn't want people knowing who she is. But I'd always say to her, I just don't know if I'm good enough for this, that and the other. And she'd say, you're going to attract exactly the people that need to hear what you have to say. And it really made sense to me. So bear in mind, don't be feeling like you're not achieving something that you should be. Don't feel jealous of people that have got all these different clients and seem to be doing really well. Your time will come, and when it comes, you will attract your tribe, the people that really vibe with you. You just have to be true to you. You have to interpret the chart in the most honest and open way that you can, and trust your own process, basically. So follow that thread and trust that it's going to take you where you need to go, and it's going to lead you to the people that you need to speak to. There's an abundance of people out there. We've got an amazing medium in the internet where we can reach people from all over the world now and find our tribe in little pockets all over the place. And there's no need to feel jealous or to feel like you're not good enough, because the law of attraction states that, what we put out, we will get back. So if you are open-hearted, optimistic, kind and generous, you're going to receive that back. I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. I really think it's a really beautiful and true thing. But maybe that's just because I've got Neptune on galactic central point, and I just feel like I'm connected to something much bigger. And so I just trust that, we're dialed into those people and they find us on our journey. So that's it. I've done a car podcast again. Ewan nodded back off again. And I might even be able to get another episode recorded. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But for this episode, for today, I am signing off. Don't forget to review the podcast wherever you are, on whatever medium you're listening on. Sign up to my waiting list if you are interested in having a reading. I will be getting in touch with people very shortly to let them know what to expect, and we'll be getting my booking calendar back into working order. And I think that's everything. I believe that's everything. Oh yeah, if you want to be on the show, don't forget you can sign up at my website, www.stelliumastrology.com, and there's a form there that you can complete to have your chart featured under the podcast tab. So yeah, that is everything now. Take care, you guys. Maybe next time we speak, I'll have my new equipment and I'll be feeling a bit more organised and able to just get on with it, basically. All right, next time, you lot,